Welcome to our session on the Game Jam menu template project. This is an asset on the Unity Asset Store for free. I'll paste the link into the chat here. And if you're watching on YouTube, I'll make sure that's linked in the description as well. And so what we're going to do is, for the first part of this, we're just going to walk quickly through the functionality that you need just to use it. If you want to use it for your Jam games, and just drop it in. I've tried to create it in such a way that it's really easy to use, but I'll walk you through the setup for it. And then we'll go under the hood and look at the scripts and stuff that are making it work. So let's begin. So you should be seeing the Unity editor here with a little robot on it. This was just like a little silly thing that I was playing around with some procedural color palette generation. And so what we're going to do is we're going to start just by going to the asset store and importing the package. So we're going to go Window. So here I've got this is the scene. This project is called Color Toy. This is the scene Color Toy title, right, where I want my title, my main menu to be. So in this scene, I'm going to go Window, Asset Store, open up the Asset Store, and then you're going to navigate to the publisher, Unity Technologies, and I'm going to sort by release date because I just released this thing today. I'll have to cut this out of the stream, right? Okay, so I'm going to sort by release date. You can also search for Game Jam menu template is what it's called. And then I've already downloaded it, but if you hadn't, you can just hit the download button. I'm going to hit import and just import everything. All right, and so there's going to be a new folder created in your project called Game Jam Menu Template, and in it there's a folder called Animation, Audio, Fonts, Prefab, Scripts, and there's also a README, which has a really quick setup guide for it in there as well if you want to just skip straight to that. It's really pretty easy. We're just going to, in our main title scene, or this also works if you have a single scene game. So there's a couple of options. If you have a single scene game, you can just choose to load and continue in the same scene, or you can have a title scene and a main scene and load into that. Either way will work, and we have some options for that. And so what we're going to do is we're just going to open the prefabs folder and drag in both of these prefabs, right? So the main prefab is this UI prefab, and that actually has everything in it. And you can see there's our menu that appears. And then there's also this event system prefab. This is actually just the regular Unity UI event system. You need it for the interactivity of the UI. I've set it up in such a way that we're kind of treating it like a singleton, so that if you have another event system in your main scene, you're not going to end up with two. And I'll walk you through that a little later on. But so for now, we need to add it manually. You could also just add it by going to Game Object UI Event System. It's just the same as that one. I just put it in there so it'll be easier. All right, so I'm just going to give you guys a quick demo of the functionality that we have here. So on the UI object, the UI object is a UI canvas. So that was created just going to UI canvas. And so it's got the default UI canvas components on it, and then it's got some custom components as well. So we've got our quit application script, which allows us to quit out of the build of the game or to stop the editor playing. We've got our start options. This is one of the more important scripts. What this allows us to do is to choose what happens when we press start. So either we're going to change scenes and load another scene, and we're going to choose that using the scene to start variable. So this is set to 1. So this would load the second scene in our build settings. Now the build settings are found under File, Build Settings. And right now we have added our Color Toy title and Color Toy main scenes to our build settings. And you can see they have the following scene index numbers. So title is 0. And main is 1. So we're going to transition to main. We're going to load the scene main if change scenes is set to true and scene to start is 1. So you'll need to add your own scenes to the build settings and then just choose, if you want to change scenes, which scene to change. Now, the default for this is false, and what that's going to mean is it's just going to fade out the UI canvas and continue in the scene that we're in. Now, I have a change music on start variable. What this allows us to do is to fade out the current music and start playing another music clip. Let's say if you had some title music and then some main game music. In this case, it's set to false, so we'll just continue looping whatever we started. And the music that starts looping is the audio clip, which is loaded in this audio source, which is already set to play on awake and loop. So this is just the same intro music that's loaded here. We have a pause script, which allows us to pause when we're in the main. Once we've left the main menu, it's not active when we're in the main menu. Don't destroy on load means that this UI object will not get destroyed when we load a new scene. So this will persist through all our scenes. Then we have an event system checker. This is just so that this event system that we added manually, if we load a scene that already has an event system, it will not instantiate a new one. But if there's one missing, which will break the interactivity of our menu, it will instantiate a new one. Or it'll create a new game object and add the components. And we'll walk through all these scripts in a moment. And then we have play music. Play music has an array of music clips, so that you load in all your different music clips into slots in this array. Right now there's only the one, which is the intro music. Let's actually add one to that. So we'll set the size to 2. And then in my audio folder, I have this main piano 24 bar. You guys won't have this. This was just something that I wrote to demo. You can add your own music. And then we have 2 snapshots, which are volume down. That's turning down the master volume of master mixer, turning it all the way down like so. You can just click on them to demonstrate where they go. And then we have our show panels script, and this is just going to hide the main menu, show the main menu, put up the tint for the background for the options and the pause, show the pause menu panel, etc. So let's do a quick demo. I'm just going to make sure that the audio source is set a little lower. We'll set it to half volume just so that it's not overwhelmingly loud while I'm talking. But of course you can season the taste there. And so let's just give this a quick test. So if we play with the defaults and then we press start, it's just going to fade out the UI. You hear the music keeps looping, and it'll just continue in this scene. If we set change scenes to true, it'll fade out the scene, load the new scene, and then fade in. Here, it's just the same scene with a first-person character controller from the standard assets. You hear the music didn't get interrupted, right? It just keeps looping smoothly. If we set change scenes and change music, it's now going to play that second clip that we added to the array. Oh, I made a mistake there. So the music to change to was set to 0, so it faded out, but then it just played the first element, element 0 in the array. So let's do that again. So we'll set the music to change to variable to 1, and so that is based on the element index in the array, right? So element 1 is our clip that we added. The music to change to is now set to 1, so it'll now play the other variation on the music. So hit start. Oh, did it wrong again. Let's set those both to true. That's on 1. There we go. So there's our other music that starts. Now we could do the same things without changing scenes. If we turn off change scenes, we can change music, just fade out the music, and play the new music in the same scene. Okay, so that's sort of the basic functionality here. In terms of starting, we've also got an options menu, which has music volume set up and sound effects volume. Now the sound effects volume is not currently configured because the only sound effects in here are the footsteps from the first-person character controller. So let's actually just go to that scene, and I'll show you how to configure that. So we're going to go to Scenes, Color Toy Main, I'll save this. And then we're just going to go to the FPS controller. This is just the FPS controller from the standard assets. And then in the audio source here, and so you would do this for any and all sound effects. So we're just going to take the output here of the audio source, click on it, and then we'll see there's already a master audio mixer created here. So this is using the new audio functionality in Unity 5. And so I created an audio mixer for you guys here and just created 2 groups, sound effects and music, which are already, the music is already routed and the sound effects we just need to route. So here we would just double click on the sound effects group. And now we can see, if we open the audio mixer, window, audio mixer. You don't actually need to do this, but I'm just going to show you so we can see that it's working. We can see that the sound effects are being routed into the sound effects group and then out into the master, right? So let's save that scene. We'll go back to our title scene, right? So in this case, if we want to use this UI, we need to launch from this scene because the way that it's persisting is we are setting this whole object and all of its children to don't destroy on load, right? So when we load a new scene, it won't be destroyed like the other stuff will. And so now, let's make sure that change scenes is true. We can let the music keep looping. And now, if we press escape, or whatever is on the cancel axis in the input manager, we can now adjust the sound effects volume and the music volume, resume, and now we can hear no sound effects. The sound effects are turned off. We can turn them back up. And so this is the other piece of functionality we have, right? Which is a pause menu. You can see the FPS controller is still moving, right? You would need to go in yourself and disable your input code. And you know, there's still a lot of work to be done here, but you have your basic UI, which is already connected to the audio mixer. You can quit, which will quit the application, or just if we're running in the editor, we'll stop. And you can do the same thing from the options menu will take you back, and the quit button will quit the build or just stop the editor. So that is the stuff that is preset for you. So, you know, the idea is that you could just drop this in, add your music, add your scenes, choose whether you want to, how you want to start, and have some basic functionality covered. Now, please, please, please customize these buttons and the title and everything. I don't want to see these white boxes appearing in people's games. Put a little work into it, but hopefully now you can just spend a little time on the art and not a bunch of time, you know, actually making the buttons and hooking them up and so on. So let me just take a quick look at the chat, see how everybody's doing, and then I will start walking you through how all of this stuff is actually hooked up. Oh, so for the people asking, this content there's no scenes in the Game Jam template. This was just a little thing that I did myself. This stuff is not in that project file, the robot and stuff. It's empty. It's just the UI prefabs in there. So that is if you're just looking for how to set this up and just use it, that hopefully will cover you there. If you are looking for how this was created, that's what the rest of this session is about. So what we've got here is basically everything is in this UI prefab here. So if we expand this, we have a couple of different, so most of this is just UI created with the 4.6 UI, right? So we have a number of different panels, right? So we have the menu panel, which is just it's created using a game object UI panel. And then it's got some children, which include the title here, which is just it's an image element with a text object over it, right? So we could call this, change this to color toy. And we could maybe change the, let's change the color of the, let's Let's make it red. We'll make it red, and we'll make the text white, perhaps, for example. So, you know, minimal sort of little customization there, but anyway, better than just those white boxes. So this is just an image element, and of course, the idea here really is that you would make like a cool title image logo thing, maybe, and put it in this source image slot here, right? So you could use that. So yeah, we have the text, and then underneath we have the menu buttons. Now the menu buttons are in a what's called a vertical layout group. So we can do things like control the spacing between them. If we want to like make more space between them, we can adjust the spacing maybe. We'll have a little spacing there. And then in it, we just have 3 button elements, and these are created using GameObject, UI, button, which and this has just a, again, right, in this case, it's just blank. Let's maybe change the color, right, just for fun. Change the text to white. Oops. For example. And so the interactivity is achieved. So this is just the text, which is a child of the button, right? The interactivity is achieved here. So the button component here has this on-click area where you can specify what is going to happen when somebody clicks it or touches it or activates it with a controller, right? And this is all just kind of default behavior of the button. And so what I've done here is added, you hit the plus button, and then you drag in the object that has the script that you want to activate a function of. And what we're doing here is there is a script called start options, which is the one we are setting the parameters for on the main UI. So I've dragged that in, and I've selected the in start options, the start button clicked function. So that function is going to be called when we click the button. So let's just take a quick look at that function. So the script is attached to the UI object. So I'm just going to double click it to open it in MonoDevelop. And here we go. There's comments. I wrote comments for all this stuff. So if you download the package and just want to read back through, you can. I'm not going to read through the comments now. But basically, I'll just kind of walk you through the script. So we have our public integer scene to start, right? That's the index number that we want to start. The Boolean change scenes, right? Where we're deciding whether or not we're going to stay in the same scene or load another scene. Change music on start, another Boolean, right? Which we're going to decide whether or not we're going to start playing a different clip or just loop the same clip. Music to change to, which is the index number in the array of music clips, which are attached to the, let's minimize this, which are attached to the play music component here, which are in the play music component here. So we have this array music clips, and in this case, the default is for there just to be the one clip, and I added one just for demo purposes. And then there's a couple of variables that are public, but that I used hide in inspector so that people didn't get confused. Here we just have a Boolean in main menu. Really the only point of this is just to check if we're in the main menu, and that makes the pause button. If you hit cancel, it doesn't bring up the pause menu. Whereas if you're not in the main menu, meaning you're in the main scene or another scene in your game, and you push the cancel button, which by default is escape, it'll bring up pause, which seemed like sensible behavior. Then we have 2 references to animator components. So we have our color fade animator, which is attached to this fade image. So let's say you wanted to change, right now the default behavior is to fade to black, but we could also fade to white, or is it set to, that's weird, I thought it was, what's it, oh, it is fading to black. Oh yeah, it is black. That's weird. I don't remember what I did there. Did I set the color there? Oh, I think it's in the animation. Okay, actually, let's look at that real quick. So there's a couple of animations being used here. In here, we have the animator controller for fade image, and then the fade to color animation. Yeah, that's right. Now I remember what I did. let's highlight the fade image, go to the animation. So basically what I'm doing here is I'm fading the color, and I'm just fading the alpha. Although now I realize, and actually this is something I should fix. These keyframes should not be here. There should just be keyframes for the alpha. Let me get rid of these now. I'll actually push this to the asset store because I don't want this. This is not the behavior that I wanted. We don't want to have to go into the, whoops. We don't want to have to go into the animation to change the, come on. Not you guys, you. Delete, and delete, and delete. Okay, just the alpha. And now, there we go. Okay, so now you can just change the color of the image element. We could fade to red, for example. There we go. A little sort of ominous. Okay, so I'll fix that in the asset store. So basically, what we're doing is we have an animation that's animating the alpha, that's fading the alpha to opaque and then back. And halfway through that, we're loading the next scene. And so, maybe we'll switch this to white, right? Red is a little too creepy. So if you want to change the color, you can just change the color of this image, and I'll fix that in the asset store in the meantime. Alrighty, so what we're doing, right, is in our script, we are just calling in start button clicked, we're just setting the trigger of the animator controller, right, anim color fade dot set trigger, setting it to fade, which starts that animation. And so that was the long way around there. And then we have basically the same setup for just fading out the menu. I'm not going to go through all of those because it's almost identical, but just for fading out the menu if you're not changing scenes, right? So if you just want to fade out the menu and then continue in the same scene, it's doing basically the same thing, just fading the alpha of the canvas group here. So if you attach a canvas group component to a UI canvas, you can then, for example, animate the alpha and do fades. All right, let me just look at the chat and make sure this is... Yeah, the animation. So Goose McDucks asks if the animation continues in the next scene. It does, because this UI object is set to don't destroy on load, right? So here we have, this is worth talking about for a sec. So here we have this script called don't destroy. And if we open this up, it's just got one line in start that just says don't destroy on, that calls the function don't destroy on load, which is part of the Unity API, this .game object. So what this means is if we want to delete this, so normally everything gets deleted or destroyed when we load another scene, but this will not, right? So what's happening when we load another scene, let's, if you watch the hierarchy, when we hit start, it just turns off the menu panel and turns off everything but the fade image. The fade image is just transparent right now. And then if we hit escape, the pause panel activates and deactivates, but the whole UI object is still there, right? It doesn't get destroyed between scenes because it needs to be there to listen for pause events. The game menu is alive between scenes, yeah. All right, so let me keep going through this. So this start option script, this is kind of the biggest script and kind of the main script. So we have a down here, so we've got references to the animation clips. And this I'm just using to get the length. So if you want to change the length of the fade, you can just change the length of the animation clip just by dragging the keyframes. And so I'm just using the length of the animation clip to decide how long to wait before we, for example, play the new music clip. So it should be a little bit responsive, but you know, obviously you can tweak it and do what you want, or use your own transitional elements or however you want to do it. The next thing that we have is a private variable of the type play music called play music. This is a reference to our play music script, and we're just getting a component reference to it using play music equals get component play music in awake. So we're getting a reference to that, and that's so that we can call down here our play new music function, where we just basically we're triggering a fade up, and I'll show you guys what's going on in play music in a second. So we're fading up the volume very fast. It's like 0.01 seconds, so like 10 milliseconds almost instantly. And then we are playing the selected music, which is specified by the music to change to variable, right? So we are choosing what music we want to play, and then we're going to play that selected music by calling the function play selected music of the play music class. Okay, which is attached to the UI object, right? It's here. So here it is. So we can just get a component reference to it on the same game object and then call functions from it in that script once we have a reference. All right, so then in our start button clicked function, basically we're just checking if change music on start is true, right? So if we're supposed to change the music, then we're going to fade down. We're going to call the fade down function of play music. And I'll just show you that quickly because it's pretty simple. So basically, this is using, well, here, I'll go through start options first, and then I'll jump over to play music and walk through that. So basically, we're going to fade down the volume. And this is fading down the, I can't remember actually if this is fading down the master, or I think this is actually fading down the master. So this is fading down all the volume. You could change that if you want. I'll show you how in a minute. And then we're using invoke to delay the function call on play new music here by the length of our animation. So we're basically going to wait until the length of our animation has passed, and it's actually using the fade alpha animation clip dot length. It should probably be the same. I might change that, but anyway, or you can change it. So it's using the length of the animation clip and then starting the new clip, right? So it's going to wait for the fade out to finish and then play the new clip. Then we're checking if change scenes is true, right? The default is false. So are we going to keep going in the same scene, or are we going to load a new scene? And if we are, we're going to invoke load delayed, which is this function down here. And so what we're doing here is we're just saying in main menu equals false, right? So that the pause button will now start working. We're calling the hide menu function of our show panels class, and I'll show that. Actually, I'll just open it so we can get a quick look at it. So this is also attached to the UI here. And here we just have public references to all the different panels, right? The options panel, the tint for the options panel, the menu panel, and the pause panel. And we're just using this class to show and hide them. It's really simple. Basically, we just have the public references, and then if we're calling show options panel, we just set options panel.setActive true, and the tint, which is just like a 50% tint to gray out the background, we set those both to active. And then we have a hide, which is going to set them to inactive, right? And we do that for show menu, hide menu, show pause panel, hide pause panel. Pretty self-explanatory, and there's comments if you want to go and look at it. And so basically we're just going to call, so we have a reference to that right here, another private reference that we're getting component for in awake. And so then when we load the next scene, we're going to hide the menu objects, right? In this case, just hide the main menu. And we're also going to call application.loadLevel, passing in scene to start right now. So application.loadLevel takes a index number, right? Takes this number from the build settings, right? So in this case, we're just the default in start options. The scene to start is 1, right? Which is our second scene, but you could have as many scenes as you want. And so we're just calling application.loadLevel and passing in scene to start, which means it's going to load scene 1. And so this is getting called with another invoke, right, to delay it. But what we're doing is we're using the fade color animation clip dot length divided by half, right? So the halfway point in that animation is when the screen is fully opaque. So we're going to wait for it to be fully opaque, load the new scene, and then when it fades out, it'll be there. Now, it's worth noting, this is going to work best for games with really quick load times, which is generally true of most jam games. But if you are getting glitchy behavior with this, you're probably going to want to do something like fade out and then either show a loading screen or however you want to handle that, and then fade back in afterwards. So this is kind of made for smaller, lightweight games, and your mileage may vary if you have like a lot of loading time. So just a kind of a note there. And then we're invoking that, right? Meaning we're going to delay the calling of that function, but immediately we're going to set the trigger of our animator anim color fade to start fading to black or to white or whatever. If neither of these are true, right, then we're going to call start game in scene. And what this is going to do, or sorry, if this is not true, not if neither, if this is not true, if we're not changing scenes, then we're going to start game in scene. And start game in scene basically does a lot of similar stuff. It just sets in main menu to false, checks if we're changing music. If not, it's just going to skip this. But if we are, it's going to invoke play new music. Again, here it's using the fade alpha animation clip length, which is the length of time to fade out the menu canvas. And so it's going to wait for the full fade out and then start playing the new music. And then again, right, set the trigger for the animator to start the animation. And then here I just put a debug log statement, game started in the same scene, put your game starting stuff here, right? So this would be, if you had like a function to start your game, this would be where you would call that function from. Obviously, there's no game here, so I just put a debug log statement to let you know what you should do there. Yeah, okay, I know that was kind of jumping around a little bit, but let me take a look at the chat, see what questions people have. So yes, as Senor Malls points out, that way of syncing fade animation with delayed invoke could be effective if the scene is too large. I haven't tested it with a really large scene. My hope would be that, because what tends to happen if you don't have like a custom loading screen and you just load a huge scene, it just hangs on the frame. So my hope would be it would just hang on your white frame. Like the alpha would be all the way opaque and it would just hang. It's not going to show a loading bar or anything, and then would proceed. So, but I actually haven't tested it. But, obviously there's going to be work that people are going to have to do with this, and they're going to end up customizing it and stuff. But, Okay, some people asking about changing the sprite. Yeah, just load a sprite and assign it to, for example, you want to change the sprite for a button. Let's say we wanted to change the start button sprite right here. I think it's just going to have the default sprite. Where is it? Let's say I wanted to change it to that. Whoa, so ugly. But yeah, just change the source image in the image field of the image. Sorry, change the source image in the image component, and it'll do it for you. Otherwise, it just uses a rectangle. Okay, let's see how we're doing. Michael's Games 93 asks, by game stuff, there I should add a function like start game that spawns my player, enemy, etc. Exactly. Yes. Yes. Yeah. So, okay, we're going to talk about, S4LTED, Salted, I guess, asks, can you sync fade animations to match the sound like an event in the timeline of the music? Okay, I don't know about a timeline because we don't have a timeline involved here, but the fade out length of the music is based on the length of the animation clip. So if you change the length of the animation clips in the animation folder, it will change the length of the music fade. Okay, so let's look at some of the other scripts that we have here. So I'll just go through from the top because there's some simple ones. We have a quit application class, and what this uses is platform-specific compilation, right? So if we're running in a standalone build, we're going to call application.quit. And then if we're running in the Unity editor, we're going to call Unity editor.editor application.isPlaying equals false, which just stops the scene playing, right? Like so. And though that single function is getting called, so again, we've got a reference to our UI object that has the class attached, and then we're just calling the quit function of quit application. So here's quit application, and there's the function quit, and we're just calling that whenever the quit button is pressed. And that's also getting called from the pause button, from the quit button in the pause menu. So we're just calling that same function. Then we've also got start options that we went over. Pause, super simple, is just, well, not super simple, but pretty simple. We have a reference to our show panels class, private bool, which is private, a private boolean called isPaused, and a private reference to the start options script. In awake, we're using get component to get references to both of those, right? And these are all attached to the same object, which makes getting the component references really easy. Then in update, we're checking for if the button cancel is pressed. And so right now the default button for that is escape, but you could change that in the input settings, right, in the project settings. So if input.get button down cancel and not is paused, right? So is paused is not true here, right? And we're not in the main menu, right? Which was that Boolean that we set up in start options, that hidden Boolean. So this had to be public so that I could access it from pause, but we don't need to see it, right? So I did hide in inspector. So we're just checking if we're still in the main menu. And if we're not, then we're going to call do pause. And if we are not in the main menu and we're paused and the button is pressed, we're going to unpause. And then in do pause, we're just going to check, we're going to say is pause, the Boolean is paused is equal to true. Time.timescale is equal to 0. So this will pause the physics simulation and any animations playing. Won't stop stuff like our mouse input for our FPS controller, so you'd need to go in and do that manually. But it's kind of like a cheapo pause. Most stuff will stop, but you'll need to go in and manually like stop getting input and stuff in your other scripts. And then we're going to call the show pause panel function of our show panels class, right, that we saw before here. So we're going to pull up the pause panel. We're going to set it to active, and then basically the opposite in unpause. We're going to set isPause to false, set time.timescale to 1, and call hide pause panel of show panels. Let me just take a look. All right, so we looked at paused, we looked at don't destroy. Event system checker, this is worth talking about for a second. So what we're doing here is on level was loaded, we're checking. So find object of type event system, right? So we're seeing if not find object of type event system. Basically, if there is not an event system in the scene, we're going to create a new game object called event system and add the event system component, the standalone input module component, and the touch input module component. Now, I still am asking you guys to drag in an event system prefab because this on level was loaded won't get called if you're just running in the editor. But this is basically like a safety thing so that because the event system actually is not set to don't destroy on load, right? Notice it's not a child of the UI. It will get destroyed when we load a new scene. But because we're checking for it, and we're basically checking for it and reinstantiating it. I did this because you might have set up another UI with its own event system in your main scene while you were working on the game, and I didn't want you to end up with two. So, yeah. Kind of like a singleton-like pattern there. All right, what else do we have? Okay, we have the... All right, let's talk about the play music script here. So the play music handles, intuitively enough, playing of music. So let's talk about pause music. So first of all, the audio source, we have an audio source attached to our UI object, right? And so the audio clip for that is set to play on awake and loop. And that is, so I've got the title music, the intro music in there so that when we just start playing the scene, it will start playing that clip, right? There's actually no code that starts playing that. There's no code that fires the first audio clip. We're using the play on awake property to do that. And so let's take a look at the class. So importantly, we have the namespace declaration using UnityEngine.audio. And so we've got the namespace declaration using UnityEngine.audio, right? So this allows us to use members of the UnityEngine.audio namespace, including, in this case, specifically audio mixer snapshot, right? So we're using this to do our fades. And so we have three public variables here. We have an array of audio clips called music clips, which is where we're going to load all the different pieces of music, or different music loops. Then we have a public variable of the type audio mixer snapshot called volume down. This has already been created in the audio mixer. I'll show you guys here, volume down. And then we have another one called volume up, right? So this is just, we're going to transition to this. We're going to fade out the master and fade it in. Then we have a private variable of the type audio source called music source. And that is just a reference to the audio source attached. So we're going to get a component reference to that in awake, right? So we can access it. And then we have, really simple, we have our play selected music function, which you remember we were calling from start options in play new music here. And so what we're doing in here is it's a public function that returns void. It takes an integer called music choice, and that is the index in the array, right? So what we're going to do is we're going to say music source.clip, the clip of the audio source, is equal to music clips music choice, right? So we're choosing from that array at the index number music choice, and then we're going to set that to the clip in the audio source, and then we're going to call music source.play, right? Play that clip, which will loop because we've already got the loop property set to true. Then we just have two public functions called fade up and fade down, and they both take a float called fade time. This is the time that we're going to fade over. So how quick or slow that fade is going to be. And then we're just going to call the transition to function, which is part of the UnityEngine.audio namespace. You can see here, performs an interpolated transition towards this snapshot over the time interval specified. So what we're going to do is we're just going to transition to our volume up snapshot if we're fading up over the length of fade time, or the same thing for our volume down snapshot. We're going to fade down, right? Now, fade time is getting passed in when we're calling the function in start options. So up here, play new music. Where is that actually? That's interesting. Oh, yeah, here. So when we're playing new music, we're going to fade it up instantly, right? Using this fast fade in value, which is set to 0.01, 10 milliseconds. right? Super fast, basically instantaneous. It's just a little fade so we don't get a click when we're fading, or another glitch. And then we're just going to call play selected music, passing in the music to change to variable, right? So what clip in the array we want to play. And then we're using the fade up and fade down functions, mainly the fade down function, right? Where is it? Here. So if change music on start is true, we're going to call the fade down function of play music, and we're going to use the fade to color animation clip.length for it. So if you want to change the length of the musical fade, just change the length of that clip, or you could change it and just pass in your own floating point value in seconds to change the length of that fade. And let's look. We looked at show panels. Yeah, that's basically it. Did I miss anything? Oh yeah, one thing. The last thing here is for example, the options panel, we have these two sliders here. Right, and so what this, as you can see actually in the audio mixer, this is fading the volume. And so what we're doing here is we have a script. Where did I put that script? The set audio levels. Is it on here? Yeah. So on the options panel, we have a script called set audio levels. And all this does is we just have a set music. We have a set music level function, and we have a set SFX level function. And what we're doing is we are using set float and passing in the name of an exposed parameter in the mixer, right? So what I've done, what I've preset for you guys is here under exposed parameters, I've created these two parameters, music vol and SFX vol, which correspond to the volumes of these two groups. What you do is you just select the parameter, right click on it, and choose. Right now it's exposed, right? Let's take a different one. Let's take the master, right click on it and choose expose volume of master to script. And then you just have to give it a name, which is a string, right? And then you just pass in that float. And so what we're doing is we're using the slider here to call set SFX level so that the volume of the slider, the minimum is -80, which is silence, and the maximum is 0, which is unity gain or full volume. And so that's being set by the slider when we adjust it. So let me just take a look at the chat. So, and then yeah, in the pause panel, we're doing basically the same things, right? We've got our two sliders wired up the same way. And yeah, that's the basic stuff. So let me just take a look at the chat, see how you guys are doing, see if there are any last questions, and then we can open it up to a few more questions. Teddy Magnolia asks, can this UI menu be used on a smartphone, Android, or iOS? I didn't design it for that, but because it uses the input, the Unity 4.6 input system, it should. The event manager should respond to touch events. I would say give it a try. You'll probably need to make some changes. I don't know, but give it a try. It should be pretty close to working. It's not tested for that, but it should be pretty close. This is more aimed at game jams, which are not usually mobile, but give it a try. I am not shouting asked to pause a game. Should we set time.timescale to 0, or are there better ways? I mean, if your game has physics or animation, that's pretty good. It's a good start. You're going to need to still disable like input or other stuff, but it's pretty good. I'm not shouting asked, how do we stop input temporarily in the pause menu? You're just going to want to put a Boolean in your, let's say if you're checking for, in update, if you're checking for if input.getButtonDown jump, you would just say if input.getButtonDown jump and not is paused. Add a Boolean called is paused and set it to true when you're paused and check if that's pressed. Check when you press a key. Cool. All right, guys, what I'm going to do, I'm going to go off mic, and I'll keep chatting in the chat. If you guys have any more questions about this session or other stuff, feel free to hit me. I'm going to put up my my Twitter card here. So yeah, thanks everybody for coming out. Thanks for checking it out. Hopefully this is helpful for your Game Jam projects and even just for learning a little bit about how to do some UI and music stuff. And I'll see you guys soon.